So here we are in the answers to the 90s quiz. With any further ado, let's see how you've got on. Starting right at the beginning with our biggest and not necessarily best round, the biggest original single or selling original single of the decade in the UK, of course. The biggest selling single of the decade is the biggest selling single of all time in the UK, which is, of course, Candle in the Wind, 97 by Elton John, which will come back later in the quiz. What we were looking at here is a best-selling original single of the decade, and this was down in about 5th or 6th place. You know, that's how much old songs worked here. Which one was it? It was Barbie Girl. Unbelievably, Barbie Girl outsold a lot of those. I'm sure I'd have gone for Britney myself there, I think, but it was Barbie Girl by Aqua, and there is their album. If you're into that kind of thing, and Dr. Jones was the other one, wasn't it? Of theirs, Aquarium, maybe worth a listen if you like a bit of Barbie Girl. Biggest selling album of the year in the UK, of the decade in the UK, my typo still remaining there. Of course, it's What's the Story, Morning Glory by Oasis. And if you were listening a few weeks ago when that came up, I did actually say that was. I believe that Stars might have been actually the second biggest selling album of the decade, which is quite surprising there. The biggest grossing tour of the decade. Well, I couldn't put the top 4 up there because it would just count everything else out, because 2 groups from that list there dominated the tours of the decades, and they were, of course, the Rolling Stones and U2. And the top 4 biggest grossing tours of the decade by a long way are 2 Rolling Stones tours and 2 U2 tours. One was the Rolling Stones. In fact, the biggest grossing 2 tours of the decade were both Rolling Stones tours. In this case, the Voodoo Lounge one. There is the album Voodoo Lounge from the 90s. If you're into 90s Rolling Stones, it's worth a listen, but there you go. Number 4, the biggest gig of the 90s. Well done if you got this. I think this was quite an obscure one. This was Rod Stewart. In 1994, he performed on Copacabana Beach to 3.5 million people. That's incredible, isn't it? 3.5 million people he performed on Copacabana Beach. I didn't think there were 3.5 million people in the world who'd want to listen to Rod Stewart, let alone gather on Copacabana Beach. Of the Rod Stewart 90s albums, none of which are genuine classics, I have to say, there's Unplugged and Seated, which I think is probably your best listen if you want to go give Rod Stewart a go from the 90s. Well done if you got that as well. Number 5. Right, okay, this is a joint answer. 2 artists. Now, I didn't say that because I think it's a bit too hard to do that, and you can have a point for either of them. Okay, it's joint between Take That and the Spice Girls, who both had 8 number 1s in the UK in the 90s. Massive number, isn't it? 8 number 1s. There's their first big album, the Spice Girls debut album, Spice, and Take That's Everything Changes. I think that was their second album, wasn't it, after Take That and Party. But anyway, they were the 2 massive hitters of the 90s, and you can have the point for either of those. Okay, when we moved on to Golden Oldies, the covers and re-recordings, of course, the double A side with Something About the Way You Look Tonight was Candle in the Wind 97. Funnily enough, they never played the double A side, did they really? Which by a country mile is the biggest selling single of all time in the UK. Something About the Way You Look Tonight came from Elton John's The Big Picture, which I've heard decent enough things about. Robson and Jerome. Well, I didn't ask you about them. I asked you about Unchained Melody, and there were 4 times reached number 1 in the UK. First one being Jimmy Young back in the 50s, but then none until 1990, when the Righteous Brothers, on their re-release, they only got to number 14 first time round. On their re-release, because of the film Ghost, got to number 1. Then Robson and Jerome, and then Gareth Gates in the 2001, like that. So 4 was the answer there. 4 different versions of Unchained Melody have reached number 1. Now this question here, it could be a bit confusing if you didn't know. What's Not Wet Wet's cover of Love Is All Around beating Bryan Adams' record? Well, it was the band themselves. They deleted the record. Clearly, and this gives them at least some credit, they realised it may not be a record they wanted to hold. It may not be a memory that they wanted to be a part of here. So actually, it did sell more. Love Is All Around sold more than Everything I Do. But yes, the band deleted the record so that after 15 weeks, it dropped like a stone and they didn't have to have that millstone around their neck. There's their album with Love Is All Around on from there. Picture this if you're into 90s Wet, Wet, Wet. I think I'd stick to 80s myself, early 80s stuff. The Fugees version of Killing Me Softly, Killing Me Softly was about Don McLean. Now, this is why I gave you the kind of side bit here. The writers of the song claim that they were writing it and they just came up with the phrase Killing Me Softly with this song and used it, and it wasn't about anyone in particular. But the original performer, Laurie, the name's gone from my mind for a second, who they approached to sing it, felt that it was something that reminded them of a Don McLean concert. So when they sang it, that's who they were singing it about. So it may not have been written about it if you believe the story, but the song was about it there. Hope you followed that. Okay, the sixth biggest seller of the decade. I'm sure you remember this. This was the BBC celebration of themselves, Perfect Day. Remember the version of Lou Reed's Perfect Day began with Lou Reed that they used to show originally on between programs, where as they made the point, every person who performed on it did it for free just because they liked the BBC. And you know, it had some wonderful people on it. I'm of the school that a lot of people are, that I'm afraid Heather Small of them people ruined it. That's it. That's it for me. Right. Okay, so on to female recording artists. The biggest selling single by a female ever in the UK at the time, and I believe she held this until, I believe that's the case. Okay. And I believe is the clue, because it was Cher with the song Believe. A massive hit, wasn't it? There's the album it's from, of course, Believe, named after it to cash in, I suppose. People, I suppose, remember it because of the auto-tune sounds in it. It certainly was a bizarre sound, that electronic sound that we had. And you know, I thought for decades that was meant to be there. That was half the selling point of it, but apparently not. Apparently the auto-tune kicked in with Cher, not because she doesn't tune very well. Apparently she's brilliant with pitch, but she's got such a strong vibrato that it kicked in the hang out of tune. What about that, eh? The former Eurovision winner, of course, was Celine Dion. Her 2 million sellers in the UK were Think Twice, and of course, the Titanic song. Yes, the Titanic song, let's just call it that. She was massive in the 90s, wasn't she? But I have to say, I don't think there is an artist that I find more dull and boring than Celine Dion myself, but there we are. Sings very well, I'm sure, but the debut album, which sold over 25 million worldwide, would be a tough question, but come on, a record for a teenage girl? Who's it going to be? Of course, it's Britney. Look at that photo on the debut album there, Baby Hit. Remember her selling that image? Wow. Interesting enough, the video, the very, very famous video for the song Hit Me One More Time, or Hit Me Baby One More Time, I'll get there in the end, Baby Hit Me One More, whatever way round it goes, was filmed in the same high school that they used to film the film Grease. The same high school. What about that? Interesting. Well, I think it's interesting anyway. The best-selling female group of all time with 80 million sales, of course, were the Spice Girls. Apparently, certainly the first ever group to go straight in at number one with their debut album in the first ever British group to go straight in at number one with their debut album. I don't think the I don't think the Beatles ones count because of how they were marketed. Here's an interesting one. Wannabe. You're going to take a while thinking about this one. We're back on Grease again. Wannabe was apparently inspired by You're the One That I Want. Yep, you're going to take a while, aren't you, thinking about those two now, trying to find that link. But apparently it was. Number 15, the only cool artist on here, pretty much. 3 UK number ones from the debut album, the Red Hot Chili Peppers cover. This, of course, was All Saints. Remember All Saints coming out after Spice Girls, being the cooler, more relaxed version of it, who actually wrote their own songs quite a bit. Performed on Top of the Pops. Mel Black performed like about 8 months pregnant, didn't she, on Top of the Pops? But the All Saints, yes, they did their cover of Under the Bridge. I'm going to be fair. I like the Chili Peppers of that period anyway, and I love the song Under the Bridge. And I think it's all right as a cover myself. But maybe you're shouting at me now for saying that. Their big hit, of course, was Never Ever, and there's another great one here. The production of Never Ever was based on Amazing Grace. What about that? Again, another one's going to go through your head now. Production of Never Ever was based on the production of Amazing, was based on the hymn Amazing. There we go. Okay, onto the soundtracks. Which film's 90s soundtrack contained those songs? It was The Bodyguard, the biggest selling original soundtrack of all time. Of course, I couldn't put I Will Always Love You on there. Another one of those mega hits of the 90s. That would have given it away. But yes, the biggest selling album soundtrack, film soundtrack of all time, The Bodyguard. These four, much better film, much better soundtrack. I had this soundtrack. It's Trainspotting, of course. Not all of clubbing, I believe, with the originals. Although actually, having thought about that, I no, it's not, is it? And Nightclubbing, I think Nightclubbing was re-recorded for the film by Iggy Pop, if I remember correctly there. Atomic, again, wasn't the original Blondie version. It was Sleeper who did it, I believe. And I don't think Temptation was the original one. No, it wasn't in New Order did Temptation. I may be wrong there. Anyway, I think it was New Order that did it. But anyway, lots of great stuff on there. What about this one? Take Me to the River, Can't Stand the Rain, Child, Little Tenderness, Never Loved a Man. It's the one soundtrack here that is actually an album in itself because it's all performed by the same band who then toured as that band. This was from the film The Commitments. Terrific film it was, wasn't it? And some wonderful performances and songs in it. Okay. Number 19. I'm sure many of you got this. It was a huge seller. I had it as well and used to listen to it over and over and over again back in there. This is, of course, Pulp Fiction. Wonderful collection of songs on there, and obscure things. The height, really, of Tarantino's jukebox soundtracks. What about number 20? All songs you'd know, but what film soundtrack did they come from? And it was a massive seller, and it was a double album as well. It was Forrest Gump. Now, if you remember Forrest Gump, of course, it was like song after song, wasn't it? Trying to it used music to give you a sense of the period, because of course it covered such a long time, and also to give you a sense of how you're meant to feel about things, of course, in that very dodgy conservative way it had. Right, on to Indie Club. Naming that album. Did you get the first one? The first one is one of the greatest albums of all time, certainly in my mind the greatest 1990s album. It is Suede's majestic Dog, Man, it's Manfred Mann, Edwin Starr. Dog, Man, Starr. Did you get that? Dog, Manfred Mann, Edwin Starr. Man. All right then, let's move on, except for the one thing of, if you don't know that album, go and listen to it, not just once, not just twice, but about 7 or 8 times, because it is just wonderful. Just wonderful. Right, Number 22. This isn't a sequence. What are all those three? They are Sea Monsters. It's the Wedding Presents Sea Monsters. One of their best albums, in my opinion, actually. Sea Monsters by the Wedding Present. Did you get that? There you go. 23. You'll probably hate me for that. I love 23. I thought this was good there. Look at what's that in the middle there. It's a bunch of hardcore. And the arrows are pointing to it, telling you that, look, what's this? This is hardcore. Pop's hugely underrated. Wonderful album. I would say third album, but it's not. They had hundreds of albums, didn't they, in the past? But third mega album, shall we say, of the period. Okay, how you doing with these three so far? Hating me already? Hopefully not. Number 24, what's this? Well, it's the Jolly Green Giant and it's Steps because it is the Boo Radley's Giant Steps. What about number 25? Well, look, it's a picture that's telling you everything that's in an aeroplane. And what's in an aeroplane is over sea. Over the sea, in an aeroplane over the sea. Neutral Milk Hotel. A song that really splits an album that really splits opinion there, isn't it? But yes, in an aeroplane and it's over the sea. Yes, you get it. There's your indie ones. Right. Anyway, without further ado, on to rap. Do you remember these record labels? You can have half if you just got the one, because many of you will remember Death Row Records, but a lot would forget Bad Boy Records. P. Diddy's, or was he Puff Daddy at the point, wasn't he? He hadn't got to P. Diddy by that point there. Puff Daddy's version on the East Coast, Bad Boy Records and Death Row Records. So if you only got Death Row Records, you can have half a mark for that. Of course, Death Row Records was owned by one of, I think I can say this is the other side of the Atlantic, and probably in jail, it usually is. Suge Knight, one of the nastiest people in music. Oh, one of the nasty men. Really not pleasant at all. Yeah, not the person that Dr. Dre should have got involved with there, really, was he? Okay, the two albums released on the 9th of November 93, the two classic New York rap albums. Well, the clue was obviously in the writing there. The Collective Clan, the Alternative Tribe. It's the Wu-Tang Clan with 36 Chambers, Enter the Wu-Tang, and Midnight Marauders, the third album by only asked you to get Wu-Tang Clan and A Tribe Called Quest. Again, I'll give you the half marks if you only got one of them. Well done if you got the album at the same time. I gather 36 Chambers is a kind of a mathematical thing. The number 36, I gather, is everywhere in the album. Yeah, if you look closely, there's all kinds of things there. There's something about 36 tracks or something along the recording level of it. It's very mathematical, apparently. There we go. I'm a bit more on the line of the Tribe Called Quest there. The track from this album is on the poetry course at Harvard. The poetry course at Harvard. I know. What about that? Illmatic by Nas. I mean, generally thought of by a number of people, really, who consider it to be the greatest rap hip hop album of all time, and clearly rated very highly when you think about the idea that Harvard would put it on its poetry course. The track, if you want to know, by the way, is the final one in the album. It Ain't Hard to Tell. Interesting. Okay, number 29. This is, of course, The Chronic by Dr. Dre. Another one that is often pushed up into the top 5 of all time ranking hip hop albums. And one of the tracks uses the recent LA riots sampled in it. Okay. And of course, number 30, I'm sure many of you recognized the follow-up De La Soul album, De La Soul is Dead, in which they attempted to get a bit harder and go past all that criticism that they got for being soft and Daisy. Although Daisy, I believe, there's all kinds of stories as to whether it's an insult or an acronym or whatever. But there we go. The Death of the Daisy. Right, onto the grunge and alt rock. Now, this was a bit sneaky. Which grunge legends come from Aberdeen? I'm sure many of you just knew anyway, but I don't mean Aberdeen, Scotland. Okay, I mean Aberdeen in Washington State. It's Nirvana. Nirvana come from Aberdeen, and there, of course, is their classic Nevermind. What about number 32? The album which lyrics deal with government conspiracy, race relations, alien, blah, 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 blah. All of that, but is named after a Latin style of music, which they never use on the album. It's the Pixies, it's Bossa Nova. Two Pixies albums from the 90s on there, Bossa Nova and Trompe le Monde. I prefer Trompe le Monde myself, but there you go. Pixies does not, the album does not have Nova. I apologise for putting the in there as well. I know it upsets a lot of people, as they are just Pixies. But yes, no track on there is in the Bossa Nova style at all. And that's just a normal list of lyrics for Black Francis, really, isn't it? Went on to a solo career in the 90s. Most people cite his second album, Teenager of the Year, as the one that he did best on. But I think his debut, self-titled, when he turned his name around to Frank Black, I think it's a wonderful album, well worth checking out. Okay, who connects the Red Hot Chili Peppers in the 90s? So Johnny Cash, Tom Petty, Mr. Hanky the Christmas Pooh. Well, Johnny Cash is probably your best tip there if you know about the role this man played in the relaunch of Johnny Cash in the 90s. This is, of course, Rick Rubin. The Chili Peppers obviously have been going, they've done a few albums by this time, but Blood Sugar Sex Magik absolutely blew them out of the water and made them megastars. And it was Rick Rubin's first cooperation with them, and you know, with Frusciante as well in there, I think everything came together well. I have to say, I'm not a massive Chili Peppers fan. Certainly, I'm not a fan of their later albums, which all begin to get a little bit samey for me. But Blood Sugar Sex Magik is a classic, a wonderful thing. And of course, Rick Rubin also produced Mr. Hanky the Christmas Pooh. There you are. Something about South Park, isn't it? They managed to get Shaft himself song about big chocolate salty balls. His chocolate salty balls. There you are. Never mind. The alt rock classic song is, of course, What's the Frequency, Kenneth? That's the song. That's the story. I'm sure many of you know it. If you don't, yes, Dan Rather was just basically walking along home one night, and he was attacked by two men who repeatedly hit him, shouting at him, "What's the frequency, Kenneth? What's the frequency, Kenneth?" Now, some come up with alternative answers to this. I know there's one story that's been spread around that basically he thought he mistook him for his boss, and he wanted to know from him to get out of his job or something. But that's not, I think it's pretty well established now that it was a man who I gather was schizophrenic, who decided that CBS were beaming these into his head. The man who they're pretty sure did it later on attempted to break into CBS and actually killed somebody in doing so, believing they were beaming into his head. For my money, it is REM's best song. Let's be fair, I'm not a big REM fan, and I don't really get why everybody loved them so much. They make nice stuff. Losing Your Religion is a nice enough song, and you know, lots of others are. But What's the Frequency, Kenneth is a cracking song, isn't it? Okay, the Seattle lead singer who I always thought I'd go first. It was Eddie Vedder of Pearl Jam, who wasn't a particular friend of Kurt Cobain, I gather. He was reacting in an interview, got very disturbed by it. Okay, moving on to the lyrics round. Songs that promote movies. Walk in shadow, move in silence, guard against extraterrestrial violence. Well, the clue's obviously there in the last line. In the 90s, which movie was about guarding against extraterrestrial violence? It was Men in Black by Will Smith. Remember his album, Big Willie Style? when he came over here, people explained to him quite what that meant in Britain, that it's something a bit different from the US. Fair to him, I think he took it in his stride. Dressing like your sister, living like a tart, they don't know what you're doing, babe, it must be art. Hold me, kiss me, kill me. It's not on Zooropa. I've just put that up there as a 90s album worth checking out. I think Achtung Baby needs any promotion from me. It, of course, was there for Batman Forever, the third of the Batman films, the one with Jim Carrey as the Riddler, which had a brilliant video in it in which Bono and his kind of fly character ended up being in some kind of Batman thing and ended up dead, I think, at the end of it, but there you are. There's a few little clever little things there about clever little art references. But anyway, as I walk through the Valley of the Shadow of Death, I'm sure a lot of you could look from this. This, of course, is Gangsta's Paradise from Coolio, and of course his album, if you so wish to hear the whole album, is also called Gangsta's Paradise. A song that is one of many that is based around the Baroque song, the Baroque legend of Pachelbel's Canon, isn't it? Yeah, you're thinking, well, Pachelbel's Canon, very famous piece of music, worth listening to. Many songs have been based around and tracks have been based around Pachelbel's Canon, including All Together Now by The Farm. But Gangsta's Paradise is another one that is. I've been a player in the crowd scene. A flicker on the big screen. My soul embraces one more in a million faces. A bigger hit than those previous three. Did you know it? It was I Am the One and Only from Chesney Hawkes. He did have an album as well. I Am the One and Only from the song Buddy, from the film Buddy Song, which Chesney Hawkes starred in alongside Roger Daltrey, who was playing his dad. There you are. So it's there to promote that, although and the video I think showed that off. But there we are, Chesney Hawkes. My wife went to see Chesney Hawkes in concert once. No idea why, long before I knew her. So can't blame me for it. The One and Only, written by Nick Kershaw, of course. Don't Tell Me It's Not Worth Trying For. Of course you knew that. Everything I Do, Bryan Adams. You knew that song straight away, didn't you? Everyone does. It's ingrained, it's imprinted on everyone's memory, isn't it? Okay, the last 10. I hope you're doing all right on this so far. The boy and girl bands. Surely everyone recognises Westlife. Who else does that in white suits? There's their debut album up there. If it's your thing, it does what it says in the tin, that album. It's very Westlife. What about this one? You must remember the double denim. It was Bewitched. And they're also self-titled, of course, early album. They had a number of hits. They had another number one apart from Say La Vie, didn't we? That's the video. A catchy song, wasn't it? Bit of fun. This, of course, is Boyzone. Huge from the 90s. But, you know, try and name more than 4 of their hits. Anyway. This, I think, was from their crucifixion of Cat Stevens' father and son, this video, but there are, never mind. That's in the corner is what I'm reliably told is the album to check out if you wish to, of theirs from the 90s. Number 44, you must recognise that. It's Take That from Could It Be Magic, isn't it? A video for Could It Be Magic. Look at Robbie on the left there. And there we go. We've already promoted Everything Changes before. Here's their other biggie. 45, just a little bit different here, rather than throw the expected new kids on the block at you. And we'd all rather forget them, wouldn't we? It's Colour Me Bad. Remember them? They want to sex you up. Yeah, with all those coloured waistcoats everywhere. And there's their album, CMB. Okay, into the last 5. Dance music. The case. Well, the clue was in the question, isn't it? Biz Markie's song was called Alone Again because it sampled Naturally, from Gilbert O'Sullivan. 70s cloth cap singer, Gilbert O'Sullivan. Gilbert O'Sullivan wrecked dance music for everybody. Should have just told them off a little bit. Never mind. The Cornish dance. Well, how many Cornish dance wizards are there out there? This is the genius that is Aphex Twin, of course, who may have released his first EP in September 1991, but it was a while before he released his first album, and then it was a compilation album of songs that had not been released. There we go. Selected ambient works, and what an album it is too. Right, this is a bit of a thinker, this one. The debut single that hit #1 in the UK 2 years after its original release, after Kiss FM listeners showed their love for it, was Let Me Be Your Fantasy by Baby D. And there's the Baby D album Deliverance in the corner there. Let Me Be Your Fantasy. It was a cracking song, wasn't it, at the time? Really smacked in your face as a dance track, that one, didn't it? The 90s dance duo, originally called the Dust Brothers. I suppose the name didn't change that much. If you go there, they had to change the name because the Beastie Boys production team, I suppose quite understandably, took a bit of umbrage at someone having the same name as them. So they changed the name to the Chemical Brothers instead. There we are. Right, so the dance track, number 50. The dance track, that was the second single from the debut album of the production. It was Unfinished Sympathy by Massive Attack. Massive Attack, who renamed themselves for this track Massive. That's the second one there, the adjusted band name that they used to avoid the risk of losing airplay during the Gulf War. So it was just Unfinished Sympathy by Massive. Of course, it had Shara Nelson singing on it, and that music video of her walking through a section of LA in one continuous shot, which was then ripped off much later, or a few years later, by The Verve, wasn't it, for Bittersweet Symphony? And yeah, it was voted the favourite national anthem in '98 by Radio 1 listeners. Fantastic, eh? I hope you did well on that. There'll be a new video soon, not entirely sure when. Remember, we're associated with Richard Shaw's 3 albums from a year. This year, of course, this week, of course, or this fortnight, is the 90s. So it's actually the best 7 of the 90s. If you're not sure what that is, look up Richard Shaw on Twitter and you can see what there is. Or just look at the hashtag 7albums90s, and you'll get involved in the chat. Basically, choose your favourite 7 albums in order from the decade, submit them on Friday the 19th, and then on the Sunday, wait and see, sometime in the evening, probably by the time he gets through everything, could break Twitter this weekend, that weekend, that poll, then see he'll have at least top 100 for you of the votes there, sometimes as high as top 200 with the number of albums that go in. So whenever we go out to a new year, there'll be a new music quiz. Please remember to donate to my Just Giving page, and do let me know on Twitter how you got on. I'd love to hear how you did with this quiz there. Thanks for listening to me waffle away. I hope you've enjoyed it. Remember, if you haven't done them before, there's many, many more music quizzes there for you to look at. Maybe even look up my my playlist and work your way through. I just look after yourselves.